Toronto, New Haven, Manchester, Barcelona, The Hague and the Auckland region. I have got other questions to ask the panellists, but we want to be democratic here, so I'm going to open it up to you now. And what I want you to do, if you would, is please don't give us a speech. Do tell us very quickly who you are, the question you want to make, and if you want to make the question to a particular member of the panel, say so. I would like to take 10 or 12 contributions from the floor, and then I'll ask the panel to respond to those, but only to pick one or two panellists that are most interesting to you, and I'll ask you a couple of other questions then myself. So I think I've got Stephanie and Yazzie to operate the microphones. Are they in the room? There's Yazzie. Is Stephanie around? Great. No, you're not Stephanie. But you got your hand up. So you get the microphone first, sir. So very quickly, make your points, and then we'll collect all of the points, and then we'll have a response from the panellist.
My name is Christoph Meyer, town of Zurich, Switzerland. I would be interested if the panelists would answer the question the mayor of The Hague asked a little bit. Are there new concepts about this kind of high-skilled migrants, temporary integration concepts? That's what we don't know as much about as other things. So I would be very interested in answers to that.
Great, that's a very clear question, thank you. Who else is next? Yes, please, sir, there's one here. Stephanie, have you got your microphone as well? So if you can...
Thank you. My name is Bashir Qureshi. I'll be speaking about the media and the role of the media later. But my question is more to the political establishment, you know. When we use the word migration all the time, do you realize how loaded this word is today in European political context? Why can't we use the word mobility, which actually deals with not only migration but also asylum and refugees? Because 50% of people who come to Europe today, they are not migrant, they are asylum seekers. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So what about the language here? There was one at the back, the lady right at the back, yes, and then we'll come to you, sir, and then to you, sir. Yeah.
Good morning, my name is Joy Warmington, I'm from the UK. I was wondering whether or not the strategies for working with indigenous populations. So I think Julia alluded to some backlash in terms of anti-immigration feeling in Toronto, and we have the English Defence League in the UK. So what's been done to support the indigenous populations to accept and to embrace migration?
Yeah, and I guess, Joy, indigenous could mean two things in this context. It could mean the majority population that's already there, or it could, in the case of New Zealand and Toronto, also include the native populations of the country, which would be very interesting. Now, then there was a gentleman just here. Yes, please, sir.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Iguchi from Japan. I'm advisor for City Alliance with high density of foreign citizens. Mm-hmm. And my question, just a fiscal point of view, there has been naturally a very negative impact on the local economy by the global economic crisis, especially on the, you can also notice that there are greater deficit and also in the city budgets, and that is also hindering in the development of integration process at local levels, also in my country. And no one referred to this question so far. Therefore, I would like to ask you, also from the standpoint of sustainability of your policies. Yes. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. And of course, it's not the case that all local economies and all cities have lost. There are many that have won. And we have some representatives from cities that have benefited from the crisis, so we may hear from them. But it's a great question. Yourself, sir?
Good morning. My name is Les Heitke. I'm with the National League of Cities out of Washington, D.C. My question is this. One of the strengths of many people of migration or immigration is their entrepreneurship. What are your banks or financial institutions doing to help immigrants establish credit? And then what are you doing to help immigrants launch small businesses so that they too can become independent and contribute on an economic level the way that most cities operate?
Great, thank you very much indeed. Yes, yourself, madam? We'll take two more after this, so if you want to get in, raise your hand. You're next, and you're next, sir.
Hi, my name is Crystal Morehouse, and I work for the Bertelsmann Foundation in Germany. I was just wondering, if you were to evaluate your current policies, how many of them deal with the past and mistakes that have been made in the past on integration, and how many of the policies are actually forward-looking? Because you talked about the dynamism of how your populations are changing rapidly, and that there has been this game changer with the economy in many of your situations. So I'm just interested to know how much of your policies deal with the past and how much are forward-looking. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Lady here. Thank you very much, Yazi.
So, hello, my name is Aisha Özbabacan. I'm working for the Department for Integration Policy of the City of Stuttgart and representing also the European Cities Network for Local Integration Policies called CLIP. We already talked about the global economic crisis had hit many, many cities. And I wonder that due to the low income business taxes, many cities had to cut their social and cultural programs. What does this mean for the integration concepts, for the strategies you already have and the good programs?
Thank you very much, and I'm afraid the last gentleman, if you could keep your hand up, sir, that's it, right at the back. While the microphone's going to the gentleman, let me just say, panelists, I'd also like to ask 2 questions of my own, and one of them is to just ask you to tell us a little bit about where does leadership come from on this agenda of migration or integration or mobility in your city? Is there a plan? Is there a policy? Do you want to highlight a particular initiative? And how do you engage stakeholders? As city government, how do you do that? Those are my 2 questions. Yourself, sir.
Thank you, sir. My name is Artem Lazar, United Kingdom. Just had a question for the panel, especially as pretty much all of you work for local governments. And the question is, during time of fast change, and especially as we're experiencing today during times of economic crisis, human beings in general tend to be territorial, and also politicians often they come out with populist policies. So, never mind central government, but what should local governments do to answer that?
Great, thank you very much. So, panelists, we've had the question about temporary integration for high-skilled workers. We've had the issue about the choice of language. Is migration the best word, or could we talk about mobility or something else? Impact on indigenous populations and how you work with them. We've had 2 different questions about the fiscal impact of the recent crisis and how that may have affected the ability of local governments to meet some of their settlement objectives. A key question about entrepreneurship amongst international populations in cities. Is it encouraged, and particularly do financial institutions invest in SMEs from entrepreneurs? And then a question about how much of your policies do you think are about addressing past mistakes or versus addressing a future agenda? And then in particular, what is the role of local leaders when we have a kind of a negative environment that comes from all of this? Plus a couple of questions from myself, panel. So what I would propose, if you agree, is pick 2 of the questions that were asked by the audience to comment on. We're going to go in reverse order, and we're going to start with Vijaya.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. Let me first talk about the leadership agenda and stakeholders engagement that you asked me, because that might set a context.
Yes.
As far as leadership agenda goes, we have heard time and again about the disconnect between the national migration policies and the local initiatives. So if we put that aside and talk about leadership that is truly transformational leadership, I think we have to move beyond advocacy and lobbying and the talk fest that goes on in quite a few countries. This is about action. This is about really delivering what we are about to deliver. So what we have done in Waitakere is, apart from effective advocacy, which I think city leaders or local government are very good at, when you look at the city administrators, we look at how do we actually build community capacity? How do we actually nurture community leadership so that you're not just advocating and it's falling on deaf ears, but how do you energize action? And I think a lesson from Waitakere would be quite good for you to take on board. I'm not forcing you to, but we move beyond advocacy and involve our Waitakere Ethnic Board into actually land use planning and city planning. We involve the Waitakere Ethnic Board in presenting to us creative spaces where people can have active dialogue and where people are not afraid of saying things and not afraid of not it being heard. And in Waitakere, we also encourage a lot of submissions coming from these ethnic boards, which are not just, again, submissions that are dumped into the dustbin. So the fact is that we have moved from advocacy, we have moved from plain lobbying to engaging with the communities, building community capacity, so much so, the gentleman at the last row asked about local government. You may not even need the local government city leaders if you go about building that community capacity. In our case, we have the Waitakere Ethnic Board that has grappled with this issue, and they are the ones who are asking their people to step up, and they are the ones who are now engaging in the city elections, because unless your voices are heard, it's never ever going to be effective. So that's one part of it. Mm-hmm. The second part of it is, how do we engage? We actually engage with the, say for example, the Pacific Advisory Board or the Waitakere Advisory Board, not as a matter of meeting in 6 months' time. They are a council-committed, quasi-judicial committee. So their voices have got a constitutional representation, and that has helped us quite a lot in creating urban spaces, in creating friendly inclusion policies. And I keep challenging the national decision makers. It's not enough to talk about migration. It's not enough to talk about settlement. It's actually important to talk about inclusion. Because getting people to speak in English or asking them to win spelling contests or becoming a queen bee in spelling things are not enough. It is about who they vote, how they vote, and whether they can become the leaders themselves. So as a young nation, we are trying to work on this issue. And I hope, Greg, when Auckland becomes a super city, the voices are not lost. Because the minute you become big, you can lose the voices. I can get a bit passionate, so I think I'll stop here and wait for others.